In this video, we'll be upgrading our PI Server 34, 380, 70, 64-bit to PI Server 2016. In previous videos, we planned out our architecture and confirmed that we meet system and compatibility requirements. We also installed a SQL Server 2012 Express Edition. It was important that we confirmed that our PI data archive was healthy and verified that all of our interfaces were buffering before we began, because a PI Server upgrade requires one or more server restarts, and without buffering, data sent during that downtime would be lost. Now, from that PI Server architecture discussion we had in a previous video, we know that we want to install the AF service and the AF SQL database on this same machine. To find the process for that, we'll open our live library again at livelibrary.osisoft.com, and in the server section, we'll select our appropriate version, and in installation, asset framework installation, AF server installation, we'll find the different procedures for installing an AF server on a single computer or an AF server on multiple computers. I'm going to be installing my AF server components on a single computer, and I'll summarize this section by saying that all I have to do is run the AF Install Kit on this machine and select all the features to accomplish both installing the AF SQL database and installing the AF server service. Now, if I had two machines that I wanted to install the AF server on, one for the SQL database and one for the AF service, I'd follow this section where it would describe the process where I first have to install the AF database on the SQL server and then run the install kit on the AF service machine. From that preparation video, we also learned that we want to install all of our PI server components on this machine locally. So let's make sure that we can do that. First, I'll check my permissions. In the Server Manager, I'll look at my local users and groups, and in the Administrators group, I'll make sure that I'm local here, and I can see that my personal account is a local administrator, so I should have no problem running my install kits. Next, I'll check my permissions on the SQL Server. So I'll right-click on my Management Studio and run it as administrator. And here I can see that I'm connecting to the local hostname PI SVR 2016 and the local SQL Express instance. And under Security, Logins, I'll find the built-in administrators group. And here we'll learn that anyone who's a local administrator is also awarded the SQL role SysAdmin. So what this means is because I'm a local administrator, and because all local administrators are sysadmins to the SQL Server, my account is also going to be a sysadmin. So we'll close out of that. And we'll run our AF Install Kit, which should install both the SQL database and the AF Server service. So I'll find my PI install folder on my C drive, right-click on the AF Server Install Kit, and run it as administrator. I'll extract it to C drive PI install / extracted. And now before the AF server itself is allowed to install, we'll have to install Microsoft.NET Framework 4.6. This is the component that will very likely require a system restart, so make sure you're planning your PI server upgrade along with a server scheduled downtime. So I'll click OK. So now that the .NET Framework 4.6 has been installed, we'll click Finish, and here's where we require the restart, so I'll do that now. Coming back from a restart, the AF Install Kit will run itself, so we'll click Yes. And I will click Next to install the PI AF Server 2016. This is the feature selection page where if you're installing your AF server on two separate machines, you'll first uncheck the application service and only run these two features on the SQL Server machine, and then come over to the AF service machine and just run the top feature. But since I'm running both on this machine, I'll enable all three features and click Next. If you're running your AF service on the same machine where your SQL exists, OSIsoft recommends that you use this virtual account AF service. If you're running your SQL Server on a different machine than your AF service, OSIsoft recommends that you use a low-privilege domain account. So I'll select virtual account because both of my components will be on this machine, and I'll click Next. And here's my local server instance, PI SVR 2016. And then the SQL Express instance that I verified that I have SysAdmin to. So I'll click Next. And after reviewing all of the features and settings, we'll click Install. And it looks like this has been a successful installation of the PI AF Server 2016. So we'll close this screen and just verify a couple things. First, the AF service will run services.msc. And we'll verify that the PI AF application service is started. So there is my PI AF application service. And we'll come to our SQL Server Management Studio again. And connecting to the local SQL server. We'll check our databases for the PIFD database, which is the AF SQL database. Now that the AF server has been installed, we can begin to upgrade our PI data archive. If you're using your module database for PI Batch or PI ACE or any custom application, you'll first have to run the MDB to AF preparation wizard. Now, I'm not using the module database for anything, but it's in OSIsoft best practices to run the MDB to AF preparation wizard anyways. To do that, we'll have to download System Management Tools 2016. So in the tech support website at techsupport.osisoft.com, we will download PI SMT. This is the install kit we want to download, and we want to click here and follow all the instructions. I've already downloaded this install kit, so what I'll do is open my Explorer and find my PI install folder, right-click, and run it as administrator. I'll extract it to the same spot. They should install the PI System Management Tools, so we'll click OK. So it'll have to install the PI SDK first, so we'll click Next and install. So now that the System Management Tools 2016 has been installed, we'll go ahead and run it as administrator. And I'll participate in the Customer Experience Improvement Program. And here's where we'll run the MDB to AF preparation wizard in Operations AF Link. We'll select our server and click on the MDB to AF synchronization wizard. Click Next. And make sure our PI data archive is selected here, and we'll click Analyze to analyze the module database before we can choose to sync it. So it looks like we have one security issue before we can finish our preparation wizard, so we'll click Next. And what we have to do is create a mapping for PI admins. So I'll click here to create a mapping, and I'll map our local administrators to PI admins here by finding my PI Server 2016 users and groups and typing in administrators. And then create. So that clears our security warning, so we'll click Next. And now we have to create a database on our AF server to sync. So we'll connect to our PI AF server, and we'll create a new database to sync to. So right-clicking here, we'll create a new database. And I'll call it MDB to AF sync. Clicking OK, we'll click Next. And now it's going to warn us that we need to create an element PI SRV 2016. And we'll click Yes to create it automatically. And now we've successfully ran the MDB to AF preparation wizard. So we can click Finish and continue on with the rest of our process. So in order to prepare for the upgrade, the last thing we have to do is to isolate our data archive from our interface nodes. Now we can do that in a couple different ways. One, by unplugging network cables. A second way is the Windows firewall. But I'm actually going to use the PI Firewall to isolate my PI data archive from my interface nodes. So here in the security firewall settings, I'll create a new firewall with a disallow value, and I'll specify my interface host. So I only have one interface node, so one rule is enough for me. But you may require as many interfaces as you have, so make sure you deny each of your interfaces connection to the PI data archive. This rule could take up to 15 minutes to take effect, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the PI server right now instead. So right-clicking on command prompt, I'll run it as administrator. And here I'll change directories to the PI server /ADM directory. And we'll run pisrvstop, pisrvstop. So now that the PI server has been stopped, let's go to our interface nodes to make sure they're buffering. So here on the interface node, in my PI interface configuration utility, I'll click on Tools and then Buffering. So if you're running PI Buffer Subsystem 4.3 or later, this will pull up the Buffering Manager. And here in the Buffering Manager, we can see that we have a connection problem, and it looks like there's events building up in the queue, and we have a healthy amount of time remaining in our buffer. So it looks like buffering is working right now. And these events should flush to the PI server once the connection gets reestablished. If you don't have PI Buffer Subsystem 4.3 or later, you can check the PI buffer queue in a different way. So I'll open a command prompt as administrator, and I'll change directories to the PI home directory /bin, and I'll run pibufss-qs. And this will give me similar statistics as my buffering manager. So we can see here after a couple refreshes that I have a certain amount of events in my queue. And it should be similar in the buffering manager depending on when each application refreshes. So either way will prove that you have a certain amount of events in your queue. So let's go ahead and begin our Pi server upgrade. Back on the Pi server machine, what I'll do is close SMT, and we'll go run our Pi Data Archive 2016 Install Kit, right-clicking and running as administrator. And extracting it to the same spot. And here on the welcome screen, we'll scroll down and see that my Pi Data Archive will be upgraded. So we'll go ahead and click OK. The default asset server that it asks for is where the AF server is installed. And my local machine is Pi SVR 2016, so that's correct. I'll click Next. And since we're upgrading, the previous Pi Data Archive already had a space for historical archives, but future archives are new to this machine in this version. So it's going to ask me where to put the future archives, and I'll elect to put them in the same folder as my historical archives, except for in the future folder. So I'll click Next. So when all the Pi Data Archive services start up, we should have the new firewall rule enabled. So I'll click Next, and we'll see here that my Pi Data Archive 2016 has successfully been installed. So what we'll do is we'll do some verification checks before we disable that firewall rule and then hopefully flush the buffer into our data archive. So the first check we'll do is here in System Management Tools, we'll run it as administrator, hit yes. In our operations, we'll look at our Pi version and see that we're now running the new 3.4.400.11.62 version. And now in Pi services, we'll make sure that everything's started. And it looks like everything's started except for these three, which is fine. These three don't need to be running or shouldn't be running. The next check we'll do is in snapshot and archive statistics. What we want to make sure here is that any events that get sent to queue are being archived. And so since both of these numbers are the same, we can confirm that any events that make it to the queue are making it out of the queue and into the archive. We'll confirm that by opening the data current values and checking our default Pi points. The default Pi points are installed on any Pi Data Archive by default, and they'll have a point source R, and they should be updated. So I'll search for them, grab them, and hit OK. And we can see that we have them updated more recently than our upgrade. So we can say that we've had new data since the upgrade. Next thing I'll do is check the license. Under usage, we'll make sure that our current percent match is 100. And what that means is that the current machine signature is exactly the same as the machine signature file that we sent to get our license file. If it's not the same, you can follow the steps to get a new license file from the tech support website. So now it's time to remove our firewall rule, and we'll make sure that our buffer data flushes. So in firewall, we'll delete the rule, and remember this could take up to 15 minutes to take effect. So instead of waiting, I'm going to run a pisrvstop followed by a pisrvstart. So now I'll run a pisrvstart, and the new firewall rule should take effect once the Pi server boots up. Alright, so let's hop over to our interface machines and make sure that the buffer is fleshing. So our interfaces haven't quite reestablished the connection yet, so we'll give it a moment. And now we can see that we've established the connection to Pi SVR 2016, and there's no more events left in our queue. We can see that in both pieces of software. So now we confirm that our buffer has flushed all of its events to the Pi SVR 2016. Let's go hop over to our Pi data archive and see the new events. So in data, in current values, instead of these default Pi points, I'm going to search for my production data, which is point source OPC. So I'll take a sample of some of the points coming from my interface machine. And we can see here that we've had new data since our upgrade. So we can confirm that we've successfully flushed the buffer and are getting new data from our interface nodes. Another check we'll do is in operations AF link, we'll confirm that our MDB to AF is in sync. And we can see here that our module database is currently in sync with our AF server. And so now that that's confirmed, there's only one thing left to do, and that's that we'll run the Analysis Service Install Kit. In the last video, we downloaded the Pi Analysis Service 2016 Install Kit. And we're going to run this because we need it to do any calculations with our AF elements or our AF attributes. So I'll click yes and extract it to the same folder. I'll click Next, and we'll accept the default feature selection, which is both. And it's going to ask me for my Pi AF server, which is still the Pi SVR 2016 node. And OSIsoft recommends that you use a low-privileged domain account. So I'll use my OSI SVC Pi applications account and specify the password and click Next. And I'll choose to participate in the Customer Experience Improvement Program and finally install. So we'll start the analysis service now and finish. Our upgrade to Pi Server 2016 is now complete. We've successfully installed the Pi AF server and the Pi Analysis Service and upgraded our data archive. If you're interested in more Pi Server administration topics, check out our other YouTube videos on managing archive files, setting up backups, and configuring the Pi Server security.